Ships dropping out of hyperspace! It was Mon Ramonda's sensor officer, Galerno, a human young enough not to be able to keep his voice level in times of stress. I count 4, 5, 6 capital ships. Han Solo abandoned his armature-mounted chair and moved to stand behind Galerno. He turned to his communications officer. Recall the starfighters now. Then he leaned over Galerno's shoulder. Details. I need details, he said. 2 Star Destroyers, 1 Imperial class, 1 Victory class, 1 heavy cruiser, a dreadnought, I think, 2 light cruisers, telemetry says probably Carrack class. At the back of the formation, the young officer's voice dropped. 1 super-class Star Destroyer. Iron Fist. Solo straightened and slapped his hands together. He finally decided to come in for a scrap. He calculated unit strengths. His flagship was Mon Ramonda, one of the most powerful of the Mon Calamari cruisers, and its pilot complement, led by Wedge Antilles, couldn't be better. Also in this portion of his fleet were Mon Caran, a Mon Cal cruiser of more normal strength, Tedivium, a frigate recently converted from a training ship back to a combat vessel, and Etherhawk, a Marauder-class corvette that was just 1 restoration job ahead of being dilapidated. Not nearly enough strength to handle the fleet Zsinj had assembled against him. But Zsinj didn't know that Solo's Group 2 was standing by outside the Levian system. 1 holocom call and Solo's strength would be doubled, making this more of a fair slugging match. Call in Group 2, he ordered. How long before Zsinj's force reaches us? 3 minutes, sir. How long before the starfighters return? They're grouping 4 or 5 minutes, sir. Solo sighed. Slugging match was to be the correct phrase for it. An impulse caused him to turn back to the door out of the bridge. As he'd suspected, Chewbacca was there, just outside, standing by. The Wookiee, who chose to have no official role in the anti-Zsinj group, but preferred to stay near the bridge and Solo, had come up as soon as the tenor of voices from the bridge sounded different. Solo gave him a confident grin. A second group is dropping out of hyperspace, sir. Solo whipped around to stare at the sensor screen again. It was broadening, updating. The data stream at the bottom indicated that the sensor screen was being supplemented by information from Tedivium. It showed another force of capital ships appearing on the far side of Levian 2. Telemetry indicated that the new force included 2 Star Destroyers, 2 Dreadnoughts, a light cruiser, and a Lancer-class frigate, a vessel designed especially to assault swarms of starfighters. We're in trouble, Solo said. Galerno turned to look up at Solo. He wasn't able to mask his fear. Solo gave him a reassuring half-grin. Don't worry. I know when to dump my cargo and run. He turned to the navigator. Set us a course out of here. What's the closest path to get us out of Levian 2's gravity well? The Mon Calamari navigator consulted his board. Directly through the Superstar Destroyer's force, sir. Figures. Make that our primary course. Pass it on to our group. Done, sir. Communications revised my order to Group 2. Tell them to be on course and ready for a jump at any second, but to stand by. Yes, sir. He turned to Captain Onoma, a Mon Calamari male with salmon-colored skin. Captain, take us out. Yes, sir. Third hostile group dropping out of hyperspace. Solo turned to look, disbelieving at Galerno. You have got to be kidding. On the bridge of Iron Fist, the Warlord Zsinj stood on the command walkway above the crew pit. He did not stare out the forward viewports, which showed only starfield along his enemy's exit vector, but down into the screens of his bridge crew. He was not a tall man, nor was he physically impressive. He was as round as any merchant gourmand, and his exaggerated bandit-style mustachios suggested that his self-image was quite different from the image he projected. The white Grand Admiral's uniform he wore suggested a rank he'd never earned in service to the Empire, and those who knew that fact could not help but attribute to him the sins of pride and self-deception. Only he knew how many of these attributes were affectations, false clues to persuade his enemies and superiors and subordinates to come to incorrect conclusions about him, to underestimate him, sometimes to overestimate him. That could, on occasion, be useful. Beside him stood the man in charge of his ground troops and starfighter support, General Melvar. Zsinj was lucky to have found a kindred spirit in Melvar, a man who painted on the face of a dedicated sadist when confronting the outer world, and then removed it, revealing features extraordinary only in their blandness in the Warlord's company. Melvar could blend with any crowd on any world with his natural features, and probably had many more alternative identities tucked away than the score or so Zsinj knew about. Mon Ramonda and the rest of his fleet are still coming on at full speed, Melvar said. But even with the 2 Carrack cruisers out and our maneuverability impaired, we should be able to give her a sustained broadside. If we concentrate on her power and engines, we'll trap her there. She'll never get far enough away from Levian 2 to make hyperspace. Zsinj nodded absently. Time until Mon Ramonda is under our guns? A crewman shouted up, "Ships appearing ahead! A drop out of hyperspace! 3 vessels, sir. A Mon Calamari cruiser, an Imperial-class Star Destroyer, and a Quasar-Fire-class bulk cruiser." Zsinj sighed, vexed. He looked forward through the viewports, but couldn't make out the new enemies. I didn't realize Solo had more of his fleet within range. Not that it matters. Enhance the view. A hologram appeared before a portion of the main viewport. On it were 3 vessels his crewmen had described. All 3 were turning to Zsinj's port, exposing their sides, ready to fire on the oncoming superstar destroyer. They're angling toward the escape vector Mon Ramonda will take, Zsinj said. Toward our weak flank, where the Carrack-class cruisers have been knocked out. They're going to line up so that we'll walk into the worst of their damage if we adjust to continue our prosecution of Mon Ramonda. But we're not going to play their game. Melvar smiled. I somehow doubted we were. Zsinj called down to his communications officer. Send Red Gauntlet, Serpent Smile, and Reprisal on ahead. Punch a hole in the defensive screen they're throwing up. Bring the starfighters back to Iron Fist to act as our own screen. He turned to his weapons specialist. Ready all guns. Tell them to fire on Mon Ramonda as they bear. Yes, sir. Zsinj straightened, smiling. Solo really should have taken my call. He might even have survived, for a while. The leading edge of Mon Ramonda came within gunnery range of Iron Fist. Turbo laser flashes by the hundreds lit space between the 2 capital ships. Far ahead, similar flashes illuminated the void between Solo's Group 2 and Zsinj's advance force. Like a younger sea mammal sidling up beneath its mother, Mon Calamari moved up below Mon Ramonda, moving into the sea of turbo laser fire with her sister ship, her back to the larger vessel's belly. Zsinj felt his shoulders sag as he witnessed Mon Calamari's maneuver. We've lost Mon Ramonda, he said. Melvar offered one of his rare frowns. They've just barely moved into our range. Correct. But they're collaborating to absorb our battery assaults, dividing the damage between them. And since I was foolish enough to bring back our starfighters to protect our engines, they can concentrate their shields against us. We have nothing to batter their topsides with to keep them honest. Correct. Zsinj shook his head. This isn't going to go down in the history annals as a loss for me, Melvar, but it is a loss. One little mistake of Solo slips through my fingers. Still, you haven't lost anything but the ammunition and power you've expended. True. He leaned down to face his weapons officer. Continue with the barrage until they make the jump to hyperspace. Not your fault, Major. Mine. Thank you, sir. Still pensive, Zsinj turned away and headed out of the bridge. The rest of this battle was going to be mop-up. His subordinates could handle that. He needed to rest and prepare for the next engagement.